Hello. So, welcome to the business planning webinar. This is a really great time to talk about business planning as you guys are in the Technovation curriculum. And I just wanted to start by saying hello, mentors, students from all over the place, coaches. I'm so glad to welcome you guys to the webinar today with Amy Gnagy and Jim McLaughlin, who work at Accenture and Mars, respectively, and who will discuss business planning with you guys. Stay tuned until the end. It's going to be worth it because they're going to be responding to your questions that are Technovation specific or generally about what they're doing in their jobs. So that's pretty neat. You have a really great opportunity here to talk to people who are experts in the field. And my name's Amy Gardner. Here's a picture of me for those who might not have the webcam. I'm the Technovation Director of Curriculum, and right now you guys should actively be working on your business plans or be getting ready to do this. So this is a perfect time to talk about all things business plan. You might have questions about what a business plan is, even basic questions, and we're here to answer all that for you guys. We want to help you begin on this, but first, why don't we get to know a little bit more about Amy and Jim and what their roles are at Accenture and Mars. So let's start with Amy Gnagy. Just a little bit of background, some research. Accenture is the world's largest consulting firm as measured by revenues. The multinational company has over 373,000 employees and serves clients in more than 200 cities in 120 countries. Amy is the managing director there. So Amy, can you tell us a little bit more about what a managing director does in broad strokes at Accenture?
I sure can. So it's funny you asked that because today I was just talking to one of my colleagues and he had mentioned, don't you feel like a babysitter all the time? So a lot of times I do babysit what's going on at all of our different projects, and I'm also a sounding board for our clients when they're stressed out about something that we're delivering or about an issue that they have, and hopefully trying to solve their issue for them. But in all seriousness, as part of my role as a managing director, I'm responsible for a portion of our business. I'm specifically responsible for all of our infrastructure work and our banking Northeast clients. So that would be anyone that's located in Boston, New York, Philly, Pittsburgh. DC also is part of that structure as well. And I'm responsible for our sales revenue as well as our profitability. And on a day-to-day basis, I am working with each of our account teams to bring the best of Accenture. So if they have a problem with understanding how they migrate an application to the cloud, then I'm working to find our cloud experts to meet with them.
Wow.
That's a little bit about what I do.
Cool. And what did you study in school, or what inspired you to end up in this role?
Well, that's very interesting. I studied chemistry in school. I was going to be a doctor, but that didn't work out, and I went to grad school in biology and then worked in a lab during school, and I decided that that wasn't for me. So one of my girlfriends, who was my roommate in college, worked at Accenture. At that time, it was Anderson Consulting, and she said, I think you'd really like it. We solve problems every day, and it seems like something you'd be really good at. And so she got me an interview, and that was my first job interview, and this is the only job I've ever had.
Cool. Wow. That's impressive. A lot of people change jobs so much with this kind of economy, and to know that you perhaps like it so much at Accenture and it's been a really good job for you is nice to know. All right. So
yes, I've had a lot of great opportunities.
So now let's move on to Jim, our other co-host. Just a little bit of background about him. Jim is a senior director of global deployment at Mars Incorporated, which is an American global manufacturer of confectionery. So yum. Does anyone here know what Snickers, M&M's, Skittles, Double Mint, any of those delicious snacks? Well, that is all part of Mars. And it also has pet food and other food products. So they make around $33 billion in annual sales, and it's ranked as the seventh largest privately held company in the U.S. So Jim, can you tell us also in broad strokes what it's kind of like to be a senior director global deployment at Mars?
Well, I'll try my best there, Amy. I actually have this conversation with my wife all the time. People ask her what I do for a living, and she says, I don't know. He works for Mars. That's about as close as we get. But yeah, the title is a very descriptive. But what I'm responsible for is the deployment of business applications into all of our markets and business segments globally. So, we're going to talk today about the creation of apps, and we're all familiar with downloading things from the App Store and the like. But some of the applications, as you can imagine, that we use in a large business like we'd have with Mars or Accenture are very complicated. They involve quite a lot of business change, whether it be process change, sometimes organization change, et cetera. So what my team does around the globe is project manage those different change efforts as we deploy software into the market.
Neat. And what was it that led you to the path of working at Mars? What did you study? How did you get there?
Yeah, it was a bit of a complicated path. So, I could tell from Amy Gnagy that, having called it Anderson Consulting, she's had quite a long career with Accenture. Me as well. I've worked 24 years now with Mars, and my background is actually in industrial engineering. In fact, I even started as a physics major at one point in time. So when I joined Mars, I worked in manufacturing sites, worked in logistics, supply chain planning, a lot of functions such as that. But as is common in all our jobs nowadays, you use a lot of technology in order to get your work done. So ended up doing quite a number of systems projects over the years, and finally joined our IT organization about 5 or 6 years ago.
Cool. All right. So now that we all know a little bit more about Amy and Jim, let's talk a little bit about what a business plan is in the context of the Technovation Challenge. So we mentioned that during this webinar, you're going to learn a little bit more about what a business plan is, why it's used, why it's even important to create one so that you can communicate info about your app that you're creating for Technovation. But what are the various components of a business plan? And how do you understand the needs of your audience so that you can create sort of targeted communications that appeal to them? In terms of the Technovation Challenge, again, we kind of break it down into 5 things. So there's 5 areas that you will be working on with your team to really identify. And these are the product description, which in our case is about 100 words, a potential market size, potential revenue, competitive analysis, and branding and promo. And this is why I brought Jim and Amy in here, because they are really the experts in this. And they're going to help break this down for you guys. And very basically, a business plan is a tool used by entrepreneurs to organize and communicate their ideas to external parties. Because you could have the best idea in the world, but if you don't know how to present this idea, let people know where you're going with your idea, it doesn't matter. Again, you could have the best idea, and you really need to be able to communicate and articulate that idea. And the way it's usually done is in narrative form with some visuals. So it contains a series of plans for outlining your idea and future plans. All right. So Amy and Jim, do you have anything to add to this very basically?
I think you covered this part rather well, so we'll get into it in each section as we go through. But if you're going to go up and start up, any business, it's really your case for that. What is it you're making? Who do you intend to sell it to? How do you intend to promote or brand your products? It's really about how you're justifying the creation of a business or creation of a new product or service within your business.
Cool. Does that sound about right, Amy?
Yep, I think that sounds spot on.
Okay, so let's jump ahead then to the actual breakdown of these 5 components and the product description. The first section of the Technovation Challenge business plan serves as an introduction to your idea. So product descriptions for teams should be 100 words or so and contain the following information. What's the problem? Why are you guys passionate about solving it? So the problem is describe the issue and the problem that your app addresses. How does this problem impact your potential customers? Another thing it focuses on is your solution. So Explain how your app addresses the issue, the issue you identified. What are the main features of your app? And I think you'll notice if you think about a lot of your own favorite apps that they kind of tackle a few things. Like they're not trying to solve gigantic problems, but they're trying to solve for certain things. And so the amount of features that the apps will have that you're creating are not going to be, exorbitant. They're going to be kind of limited to certain things that solve certain problems. And then who are the users? Who are the potential users of your app? And what gives you guys the competitive advantage? What will make your app a success? For example, is it your location? Is it knowledge of a customer base? Unique partnerships? And I just wanted to give you guys an example of a team that advanced to the 2015 Technovation finals. So we had a big world pitch event in 2015 last year, and it was featured in Code Girl, a documentary by Leslie Chilcott. And you can see this team as they prepare and all their trials and tribulations and all that great stuff. But I wanted to give you guys an example of what we thought was a pretty good product description. So I'm just going to read it out to you. The team was WOCO. They're from Massachusetts. Their app was called Praise Pop, and you can see their logo to the top left. And just reading out loud, and think about this, really absorb what this 100 or so word description says. So it's easy to feel excluded and unacknowledged in your school community. But with Praise Pop, an innovative and user-friendly iPhone app, you can feel happier and more included in a matter of seconds. By adding to an anonymous live feed, open only to your community, you can tip your hat to and connect with those around you. You can even invite the entire community to events and hangouts in the area. Your compliments, jokes, kudos, thank yous, funny stories, and invites will spread positivity and inclusivity quickly and effectively. So what are you waiting for? Spreading kindness is always free. Let's get poppin'. And you'll see that the logo has a kernel of corn. So they have tied together this idea very neatly. It's a very clean looking logo. And I'm wondering, Jim and Amy, if you can provide us some comments on this product description.
So I can go first. I think this is a great product description because as I was reading this, I could just envision how this would work in real life and understand, a perfect use case for it. And also made me think of, yeah, that's right. That does seem to be a gap, that there's nothing that fills that in the market today. So I think that the description is very clean, it's very clear, and it really puts your mindset into envisioning how this would work.
Yeah, I totally agree, Amy. I mean, having a catchy name, a tagline. So, even when I had seen this and came back to it several hours later, I remembered that "Let's Get Poppin'" that was at the bottom there. So think about when you go buy an app from the App Store. This is the first thing you're going to read, and potential buyers literally may only spend a few seconds on it before flipping through and looking at something else. So, really try to make it memorable, or as they did, make it pop.
Nice. All right. And are there any questions in the audience about this for Jim and Amy in particular? I really want you guys to use them as your kind of people to help you out here to answer specific questions. So just keep that in mind as we go on. And if you have any specific questions that relate to your projects, you can hold on to those to the Q&A part. Okay. So the product description is the first thing. And one thing I know that the judges are going to be looking for in the Technovation Challenge is that your product description aligns with the rest of your business plan. And in terms of process, I think it's a great idea to write something out like this because it helps you really consider what you're making. And it helps create a summary so that you have your ideas clear. And as you're working on the rest of your business plan, you can always come back to this product description after it's all said and done, and you can sort of revise your description. So it's something you probably want to do at the beginning to gather your thoughts, but also come back to after everything else is done so that you make sure it still aligns with the rest of things, because things can change as you work on them. Whoops. So If there are no further questions from the audience, I'd like to move on to the next component, which is the potential market size. I'm wondering if Amy, you can talk a little bit about what market sizing is.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So market sizing helps the entrepreneur estimate the future demand for its product, so understanding how many people will use it. We have a couple of slides we'll go through here. One will be a top-down approach, and one will be a bottoms-up approach. And that's something that I use quite frequently, not to determine market size in my job, but to do a solutions estimate to determine how many people we would need on a project to deliver. So I'm quite familiar with this approach, and we can talk through how those work later. But some of the important pieces of determining your potential market size, you need to identify who your target customers are. So who are you selling this product to? I know my Technovation team is looking to sell their product to their peers at school. So that's one of the first things we talked about, is who will use this and how many people will be using it. We also need to plan the business activities, so understanding how many people may use your product or service will help you design activities to obtain new customers and service existing customers.
Cool.
And then lastly, we need to identify potential revenue.
Okay, why don't we talk a little bit about the top-down approach? And the next slide is about the bottom-up approach.
Yeah, so we'll go the top-down approach now. So I thought this was a really good slide. I looked at that this morning. One of the things that you would do to start off with in doing a top-down approach is you'd start with your total market, which is basically, anything, and I like their example here, which is total annual U.S. spend on health and wellness apps. So if you're looking at an app that meets some kind of demand for health and wellness, you can understand how many potential, what is the current spend on it today. Then you start going down and you drill down and you drill down. So the next piece is your total addressable market. So if you're looking at a yoga app, for example, this is the example that's used here, you want to then take it down from the total U.S. spend on health and wellness apps to the total spend on home practice yoga apps on all platforms. And that's our addressable market. And that's if you had infinite number of resources. So that's the differentiation between the total addressable market and the serviceable available market, which is the next step down, and it's the revenue that can be captured with your current business channels. So if you're only going after high school students, for example, because that's the number of many people you have on your team to support, or that's where you're going to do your marketing, that would be your serviceable available market. And then lastly, you get down to the target market, which is your revenue that you most likely will generate from initial customers for a product or service. So here the example is that estimated revenues from 10% of students currently taking yoga in the pilot location where this app will be released.
Wow. Any questions from our audience here? Is there anything that you might want to add, Jim, or should we move on to the bottom-up approach?
Okay. I think we can move on.
Okay, yeah. Let's head into the bottom-up approach then.
Okay, sure. So the bottom-up market size indicates a target market where you start from the bottom up, so you talk about your individual customers. Couple of points here, this example that's used. Suppose the yoga app team plans to target high school students, as we discussed in the previous slide, and they decide to conduct a survey of 1,000 students at any high school, for example. And 150 people write back, and they say that they would be okay to download the app at $2 each. And they know that with the serviceable channel that we talked about before, the serviceable available market, they wanted to service this at 10 high schools. And so if you multiply 150 by 10, you get 1,500 target students, and you're going to assume that they'll spend $2 each, so that would be a total revenue of $3,000.
Cool.
So this is a different way to do this. We're starting from the bottom up instead of working our way from the top down. So we're not starting at the available market, we're starting at the specific market.
did I notice that you're working with a Technovation team right now? Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
And when you go about talking about the business plan with them, do you think the kind of apps that they're developing have to do more with a bottom up or a top down approach?
I believe theirs started with the bottoms up approach.
Okay, that's good to know. So students who are listening with us, does this resonate with you? Do you have any questions about this kind of approach? It's okay, you can keep them till later, but I thought I'd take a chance and ask you now. So with that in mind, we also have some tips for estimating potential market size that Accenture has shared with us. We do have a question. I'm not sure if this question is completely related to the top or bottom down approach, but maybe you guys can help me figure that out. How many people should we include in the survey to consider it representative? Is that related to this topic just yet?
So I think I understand the question. I think the question is if you wanted to do a survey to understand your total market size, would you, how many people do you need to survey? So it's, is it to send it to 5 people? Is it to send it to 1,000? I think you would assume that if you send it to X number of people, only 50% of them would reply. So depending on how many, how large your target population is. So in this example, they were saying it was 1,500 students. So you would want to try to send it to 3,000 students to be able to get 50% reply.
Okay.
I think that's when we do surveys at work, we usually assume 50% of the people will reply.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, if you want good statistical evidence, I mean, you usually want to have hundreds of people that you're surveying at a minimum to make it realistic that you work out the variances. And then you can even look at things like test how sensitive the price is. So you might interview some of them and say, if we sold it at $2, would you buy this? But others you'd ask, if we sold it at $4, would you buy that? And then you get a really good idea of how sensitive the demand is to the price that you're asking for, and you can make a decision as a company. Are you trying to drive right now a lot of use and you want to give it a lower price, or are you trying to maximize profit, revenue, whatever it is? So it really that's a part of your business plan to figure out how you use pricing and how you use the size of the potential market in your overall picture.
Yeah, we got a cool question from Arshia. Which approach do you think might be more beneficial and productive for us as young entrepreneurs?
So I have an opinion, and I don't know if it's the right one, but I think bottoms up is easier in this situation just because all the data may not be readily available in the top down approach. So I mean, even if we just go back to the example in the slides, and if you scroll up one more, Amy.
Sure.
I mean, it may be difficult to start researching the total annual U.S. spend on health and wellness apps. I mean, that may be easy in and of itself, but as you start going down and down and down here, it might be hard to find that data. So an easier way to do it would be to do the bottoms up.
Uh-huh.
Totally agree. And then when you're actually trying to get people to invest in your app or your company, you can say, look, I've been out and I've been actually talking to my customers, so my potential customers, and this is what I'm hearing from them. That resonates a lot more people than just some sort of top-down analysis.
Right.
Cool. Man, this is great. I'm so glad to have you guys here because these are really good questions from the students. Okay, so with that in mind, do you guys want to talk a little bit more about estimating potential market size? Or did you cover that enough?
So I think these are pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's a really good reminder. And especially for the presentations for the Technovation teams, you have to assume that who's ever judging this does not have as much background as you have that have been working on it for several months. So you need to definitely document all of the assumptions that you used so that someone can retell your story and understand how it worked. you should, if available, to try out different approaches. So they say try the top down and the bottoms up. I'm not sure how easy the top down would be. I'm just specifically understanding my Technovation team and what they're working on. I don't know if that would be feasible, the top down, but it is a good method of comparison. And we do this at Accenture all the time. Someone will say to me, Amy, how much do you think it would cost to do this bit of work? And I'll say, I think it's $4.5 million. Like this exact same instance happened to me last week. And we went through 2 days of estimating, and it was $4.45 million. But it's because I've been doing this for 18 years, and I know what to look for, and I know how much things cost. But it's always good to double check it. So that's why they ask to do different approaches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to obviously be realistic. How easy is it to get uptake of a new application, right? I mean, if you have all the money in the world and can market it, obviously that's a lot easier. But we should be realistic in our total market size. And then lastly, they say test and refine. So it may not, what you did at the beginning of the program may not be what you end up doing at the end. And I think this is also noted in my Technovation team. So I joined the team a little after they've already started for 3 to 4 weeks, and immediately the first thing I say is, oh, have you thought about that, or have you thought about that? And I think they were like, I don't know, we've thought about only what we thought about. So it's really good to share your ideas with other people and be open to change things.
Cool. Anything to add, Jim?
No, it made a lot of sense. I would emphasize, as Amy did, to be realistic, and it's always good to exceed someone's expectations. Realistic about what you think you can actually sell, and then seek out to beat it.
Cool. Okay. With that in mind, let's move forward then to potential revenue. And we had a question before you guys start talking about that. It was about in certain countries, they usually download apps for free, so that they're thinking that they want theirs to be free too, so they'll have to find other revenue sources. And I think this has come up a lot in Technovation because they're not necessarily trying to create an app at the moment, since it's a prototype, to make a lot of money, but it's to solve a social problem in the sense, like a nonprofit sense. So I guess if you could keep that in mind as we talk about potential revenue, that would be cool. I just wanted to cover that base because the student had a very direct and good question. So for potential revenue, I'm wondering if, Amy, you can bring us up to speed on what this is and give us some examples of some commonly used app revenue models.
Sure. I think we already hit on revenue earlier in the slides when we were talking about the yoga application, and we talked about the number of students that would potentially purchase it and how much it costs. So that's really the equation for revenue. It's price times quantity. Mm-hmm. Eventually later you can understand how much profit you make from that, because revenue doesn't always equal profit, because obviously it costs some amount of money to do the services. But in this specific example here, we're talking about revenue. And revenue, they've given a couple of examples on the slides, some app revenue models. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with them, especially if you use iTunes. But the first one here is fee per purchase, so you have to pay a fee to download the app. One that I fall into this trap all the time is where it's a freemium, so you get the basic version of the app for free, but if you want to upgrade to the premium version, then obviously you have to pay more money. So this just happened to me on the weekend. We went to an art fair, and my son really wanted this app where you basically pretend like you're spinning pottery, and then you sell it and you get an auction. Well, the instructor showed us the paid version of it, so we thought, oh, this is amazing, it's so cool. And then we went home and we looked at the free version, and it was nothing like the free version. So now that we had seen the upgrade, and of course everybody wants the upgraded version now. And then lastly, I'm sure people have seen this before, this happens on websites all the time, where paid advertisements are displayed. So it's annoying to the end user, but it's paid to the app owners. A fee is paid to the app owners, and that's how they can make revenue as well.
Nice.
And then this last point on here, if your organization is not for profit, revenue may also include contributions for charitable purposes. So those could be donations of things to auction off, for example, and grants.
Definitely good to keep in mind. And for the students who are tuning in, I think it would be great if you want to revisit this idea, to think of examples of each category. So freemium, fee for purchase advertising as you're creating your app, because I can think of so many apps where you get, a cheap or a free version that has kind of minimal features, but then if you pay a little bit more, you get the deluxe model or the deluxe version or something. And, thinking about what it's worth. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and to your earlier point, Amy, about it's not always about the money you're bringing in. I mean, if we even look at volunteer programs like the one for like the coaches and mentors of the Technovation Challenge, very often you measure benefit by maybe it's number of hours someone's volunteering or the number of people that you're reaching. So in your business plan, really think about why are you in business? If some cases it might just be for a social good. It might have nothing to do with bringing in revenue, and then you'll just measure yourself against that.
Mm-hmm. And there's always examples of things like Instagram or things that aren't necessarily apps that were intended to bring in a lot of money, but to do a very specific thing that get acquired by companies because everyone loves to use them. So, it serves a very unique social purpose. So it's neat. And there are also some tips for estimating potential revenue. And I'm wondering if you could talk about this a little bit before we get into competitive analysis.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So the first one on here is explain your price point. So, you could have a tiered pricing model. If you want to use all features of the product, it's $5. If you want to only use these features, it's $3. So it's really important to understand and explain very clearly what the price point is. Also understand, did you market test this? So in the example we talked about with the yoga application, the survey did say people would be willing to pay $2 for it, which is why they came up with that price. So that's a good one. And I like the idea here of adding the competitor's charge. So obviously if you're, like, let's think about you're a gym and you're trying to get new customers in, obviously one way to do that would be, no fee for 6 months, and then you would increase the fee after that, but that's a way to get people in immediately. So those are all things to consider. I like this next one, which is to identify multiple revenue streams. That will also help strengthen the business plan. So if one of them isn't successful, then this other one may be. So that's a good way to guarantee additional revenue. And then also be realistic, and I think that's a theme that we've seen throughout the deck here. So it's good to have a good attitude about your business idea, but you have to be realistic in that you have to have credibility with the investors, and then eventually, if you think about your stakeholders as you move to a larger company, for example.
Cool. All right. Any questions before we move on to competitive analysis from our audience? If not, we will then leap ahead into competitive analysis. And this is really important because I've worked with so many students in the past in other programs who are trying to create an app. They came up with this idea all by themselves, and they thought it was an original idea. And when they went to go pitch it to somebody, their teacher, funders, whoever, they were encountered by questions like, did you know that a similar app already existed? And by then it was too late for the team to backtrack, and they had to really come up with a creative answer to why they hadn't done a lot of research about this. And this is so important. So I really am excited to be talking about this today. And Jim is going to now kind of take the helm and talk about, what competitive analysis is, and talking about an example here. So we did talk about Praise Pop before, and you'll see that there's a column in the chart you're seeing on the screen. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this, and I'll let Jim talk about this more.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So yeah, this is a great example of a very common way that we within Mars actually evaluate different software options. I can think about years ago when we were choosing some software to do to help us forecast our sales internally. You talk to different markets and get different ideas about what sort of common features they might want to use, or even different features that might be applicable within markets. And you build kind of a list of those types of features, which is what you see in this example down the left-hand side. And then you look at all of the current players in the market. Or if you're going to develop your own app, which was the case here in the Praise Pop example, you might say, well, what am I going to develop that I could actually then compare feature function to some of the others? And then even after you do this, I'm sure many of you have seen when it comes to then advertising your app, you'll see comparisons that say, see, look, we've got all of these features, we've got all our check marks, and our competitors don't. You can get even more sophisticated with some of these analyses. So for example, you can say for the features that some are more important to you than others. So you might put a weighting on one versus another. You might also look at plans for your competitors. So you might look at the existing competitors on the screen and say, do some research and say, how are they investing in their app over time? What are their market plans? Or you might look at other companies that don't even have an app in this space today, but where there seems to be a fit, and say, hey, they could develop this. And if they did develop it, what would that mean for us? What sort of competition might we have? So, so there's a feature function part of this, which is the chart you see on this page, but there's also a understanding the competitors that you could be playing against in the market that help you really round out the full business case.
We have a question from Arshia that I think is kind of interesting, and I hear a lot too from other students. Whoops. What should we do if...
It's funny, it's like...
What?
I think Siri was trying to answer the question here on my phone.
Oh my gosh. That's pretty funny. The question from Arshia was, what should we do if we have a website that's similar to our app? Do we also have to compare in the competitive analysis websites or just apps?
It's a really great question, and I think nowadays with so many different platforms in which people communicate with their customers, whether it be through apps, through websites, through social media, through television advertising, etc., you really have to think broadly about a competitive set. So don't limit yourself to just looking at other apps, even though kind of back to the example that Amy was showing earlier, where that might be the kind of the small circle in terms of your competition. As you start kind of expanding that, you may actually find that your app is competing with something on a desktop PC or in some other way. It could be competing with a service. It could be where you're able to call someone up on the phone and get answers to questions, if that's the sort of app that you're creating. So really would encourage you, it's a great question, to think broadly about the competitive set and not just for apps.
One thing I also love thinking about is, and we get the question a lot, where does a website end and an app begin for a smartphone? And one thing I always try to encourage the people working on Technovation projects is to really use the features of a smartphone in the best and smart possible way. What does a smartphone have to offer that a laptop might not? It could be GPS, it could be photo taking on the go. So even if there is a website that does share similarities with what you're trying to do with your app, you can always point out why your app is really cool to use and really, gets to why it's an app versus a website. What features is it using that really makes the best use of a smartphone?
Yeah, it is, and some of it is you have to even look at the sort of platforms that you're trying to market it to. So not everybody has an iPhone, or not everybody has an Android device, and very often, customizing apps to be able to work on those different platforms might be more complex than it would to just have a mobile-enabled kind of web view into your application. So if the browser version, I say, of your app is more widely therefore available, that might be the approach you take in terms of your marketing. It's really, it's a business choice you're going to have to make depending on, what's the audience you're trying to reach and what's the technology that's available to them in their market.
This is all really neat, and I think it gets to the heart of the Technovation issues and program. So thank you so much, and Arsha says thank you as well. Okay, so moving on, unless there's anything you want to add to competitive analysis or any further questions, I thought we'd take a moment to talk about branding and promo. When I think about Skittles, a smile just comes to my face. I don't know why. I think it might have to do with marketing. And the kind of cool issue. So I'm wondering, Jim, if you could kind of summarize for us, what the relationship of branding and promo is to developing a product and getting it out there.
Sure. So branding, and it's actually timely. We talk about Skittles here. It's right back behind me. I hope everybody can see on the video. We actually have some of our brands along the walls painted under our conference rooms. But branding is really about what you represent. I mean, it even gets into emotion and how your customers are actually feeling about you. You as an individual, you can have a brand, your application can have a brand, your company can have a brand. And you really need something that's distinctive in terms of the application name or logo that really speaks to people. And remember, your brand, and it says here around social media on the screen here, your brand really extends not just to your company or your application, but how people see you as individuals. So make sure your social media profiles reflect how you want to be seen. I work for a privately held company, and one of the things that we've learned throughout time is it's no longer sufficient to be able to talk to your customers, talk to your consumers through your products. They want to know about you as a company. They want to know what you stand for. They want to know where you stand on social issues or around the quality of the goods and services that you're providing. They want to know about the leaders in the business and what they stand for. And people are checking out your social media profiles, et cetera. So, your branding becomes increasingly important, not just in terms of what you're selling, but even in terms of whether people want to join your organization. So really critical stuff here. Then promotions are more about how you get the word out about your brand. So, you can speak to them directly, perhaps through your website, that example, or through an app store, or you can even do through a partner that might sell some related services. So, for example, let's say you create a company that's making paintbrushes. You might want to partner with a company making paint as a way to be able to advertise what it is you're selling. So it's really about how you get the word out.
Cool. And we have some cool images of Skittles. I'm wondering if you can go into a little detail on this example. I think this is going to be really fun.
Sure. So I lifted this right off our website yesterday, and this is, when we talk about branding, it isn't all about explaining the product itself. It's really the image that you're portraying with the products. So, Amy mentioned the smiles, and it's fun, it's colorful. It's something you share with friends. So when you look at the types of things and the way we're trying to reach consumers through here, this is our website, but you can see links into Facebook, Twitter, YouTube videos, et cetera. It's really about that sense of color, of fun, of engaging, personally with your consumers, or they can engage with each other as friends. So not just trying to plug my company, but this is part of branding, right? Is if you go out and take a look at the website, you'll get an idea of this. And as you actually scroll down the page, you see things, you'll see different videos, pictures, funny sayings that are really about the fun and enjoyment that goes along with the product itself. That's the full kind of picture of branding. And when we think about promotion, hopefully this will show up on the video for you. Yep. So if I put it real close to the video here, this is a promotion of our Skittles product with the Captain America movie, Civil War, that's coming soon into theaters, and in different versions of the product. So Captain America. I'm sorry for that's where I'm living right now. I know everybody here is it from the U.S., but for this market in particular, then you got the red, white, and blue promotional colors that match the flag in the U.S. And what you find as we work with our marketing teams is we'll have promotions that are geared towards different countries, depending on events there. It might be it could be Chinese New Year. It could be a lot of different sorts of events that people resonate with personally, and you attach your brands to those to make it a memorable experience for them. So that's around promoting your brand.
Neat. Cool. Any questions from the audience or any comments from Amy? Okay, then let me just kind of summarize who your audience for Technovation is specifically so you can begin thinking about this. And the judging rubric comes in really hard at this point, and I totally recommend all the students and mentors and coaches revisit the rubric for judging. I don't have it in the materials section, but you can access it on the Technovation website, and if you go to the top right, you can go to the curriculum there. A few points before the Q&A, and I know you've all been really patient, is the judges are going to be technology or business experts, and they're going to provide you guys feedback based on this rubric used to assess each team's performance. And there's different parts of the rubric that are really important. So there's the ideation part, like what is your problem and what are you trying to solve? Like how are you solving that problem? There's the business plan, which is a very large portion of the rubric. And there's also the technology. And all these three things play together, and they're all interwoven. And I think sometimes when you're just trying to get the deliverables ready, you forget about why you were passionate about the problem in the first place because you're so focused on getting all of the things ready for submission on April 21st in this case. So even if it's hard for you guys, try to meet for like an hour before you submit your deliverables and come back to why you are so passionate about solving this problem. Because that can make the difference between a similar app that might be out there, the communication of your passion about this project. There's so many instances of apps that are similar to each other. And I think when it comes down to it, Jim touched on this as well, like what is the company about? What are your virtues? What do you stand for? Why are you passionate about this? So the ideation part might seem small on the judging rubric, but it's really important too. And it also feeds into the whole entrepreneur discussion. How are you communicating this idea? And your passion should be coming through that. So as a reminder, the judges are tech and business professionals. They're volunteering their time for you guys. So just keep that in mind. And beyond the Technovation Challenge, the audience for your business plan could vary depending on the stage of your company and your needs for growth. So if you take it beyond just this prototype and beyond the Technovation Challenge, I want you guys to also understand who your potential audience could become, who might actually invest in this. Besides the Technovation Challenge. And there's a few broad categories, and Jim and Amy might be able to chime in after I just run through these, but there's venture capitalists. You're going to meet one if you come to the next webinar. She's on the board of Technovation, and she is somebody who helps find ideas that are great that just need funding. Like the idea is ready, the business plan's ready, now they need funding. So they typically invest in early stage ventures. And a lot of that goes on in Silicon Valley. If you've ever heard of Y Combinator or any of these incubators, that's what's going on. That's why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, because it has not just, the ideas and the technology, but it has academia behind it. It has the people who are venture capitalists who can support these ideas with financing. Then there's also banks. So there are also people who might be in your audience. There's foundations, nonprofits, and government agencies, which are particularly relevant for the Technovation Challenge, because you might need to get grants to help make your idea come to life. Grants that will help you, but will also help the organization giving the grant. Does it help them fulfill their mission? And crowdfunding is another kind of not so new, but kind of disruptive way to get money for things that you need. There's so many different things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and we have links to those. But sometimes those involve a huge commitment on your part too, like Kickstarter. To give an example, I financed something on Kickstarter like 2 years ago. The project was supposed to be done in 1 year. It wasn't ready in time. All the customers who kicked in money for this Kickstarter were getting very frustrated. And the person who started it, didn't plan so well. So, all of these things should definitely be taken into consideration. And I know the stakeholders are different at Mars because it's a privately held company, but I think we can probably agree that at all levels of business, you're always kind of pitching your idea, and you need to really understand who your audience and your stakeholders are. Jim or Amy, could you comment?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, yeah, I was just asking if you want to comment. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You're always pitching to someone. So, when I first got into business, I think I had a bit of a naive view that all you had to do was have a good idea and the money would come, flowing your way. At the end of the day, there's a limited amount of money, there's a limited amount of people, resources to actually work on different projects. So you're always having to pitch an idea. You're always having to convince others and have a good case for why the money should come to you or the people should come to you, to get a particular thing done. So, keep that in mind as you're building out your business plan here. And I know there's a different webinar that's going to talk about pitching your ideas, but this is a sales job. I mean, we all may not have titles that are sales, but at the end of the day, we're all in the sales business, whether you're just selling a product or you're just trying to sell an idea to get resource going your way.
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to go on that dovetail and just say that there will be a separate pitching webinar because this is an art. Pitching is really an art, and we have people from Accenture who are going to be talking about that. So I'll come back to that towards the end, and you can sign up for these also on the curriculum page of the Technovation website. So keep that in mind if you have specific questions about that, and know that there will be an upcoming webinar. Um, I just thought that I'd like to take this moment to thank you and Amy so much for answering all these questions and really getting into the nitty gritty about what a business plan is and answering our questions. So at this point, we're going to lead into the question and answer period. So I do notice that we have a question. I think it might be more Technovation related, though. Does the selection of our app depend on a first come, first served basis? I'm wondering, Arsha, if you could elaborate on that a little bit. Do you mean for the judging, or not quite sure what that is? And if there's also any other questions for Jim and Amy, please feel free to use the chat room feature, and I'll be sure to ask them. In the meantime, Jim and Amy, if you have any concluding sort of statements or suggestions for these guys who could be anywhere between 10 years old and 19, that would be awesome.
Amy, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Don't know if I have any words of wisdom today. I'm not feeling a bit under the weather, but I just think that I really admire everyone's dedication, and one of the things that I've noticed specifically in my career is that to get ahead and to get ahead as quickly as possible, you have to do those things in your off hours and before school, after school, before work, after work, to really put in the time to differentiate yourself amongst your peers. And it's the same as it is in school as it is in the workforce. And so I commend you on the time you're spending on this program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, it's actually impressive to see a group of young people actually, getting involved in this and really trying to make a difference. I mean, a lot of these apps, I've read some of the things on them aren't just about, like we said, making a profit. They're about making a difference, and so that's really great to see. And just so you know, I've talked to a lot of the associates at Mars that helped out as coaches or mentors last year and this year as well, and they personally also get a lot of satisfaction out of working with each of you. So enjoy it. I know it's a competition, but it's also a chance to learn. It's a chance to have fun. It's a chance to meet other people. So please take it in that context.
Yeah, if you watch Code Girl, and from my experience too, a lot of students can get a little bit, if they don't make it to the semifinals or the finals, they can be a little bit devastated because they feel like very high stakes. But we like to remind them and their coaches and mentors that this is a process, and what you guys are taking part in is not easy, and you've taken it upon yourselves. You've shown a lot of courage to do this. And it's more, we like to view it more as a learning experience so that you have a realistic idea of what it's like to take an idea you have to solve a problem, create a technology to actually address it, create a business plan so that it could be viable if you wanted to launch it on the Play Store or any other platform like that, just so you know what all is involved. And Technovation is really cool because it helps women do this. And from my background, I can just tell you the women in my family going back decades, whatever, they had a hard time talking about money and finances. And it was always the realm of the men in the family. And so even though women are entering the technology field, we still have to address our need to be able to be financially literate and to talk about what it would realistically take to do this. And in order to do all this, you have to have a good financial perspective, and you have to know. So that is where I think Amy and Jim have come in so handy today, because they're giving you guys the tools to really make a great business plan. And not all business plans look the same. If you look in the materials section in your go-to training control panel, you'll see some examples of different business plans that some teams submitted, and they don't all look the same, and that's fine. As long as you're addressing these main points, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what some of these different ones look like so that you know that there is no perfect way, but there are some essentials you'll need to have. So I think, I answered Arsha's question. It was more of a Technovation submission related question and less about business planning. But if there are any final questions, we have like a minute left total, and I want to be mindful of Amy and Jim's time. But I'm really excited that you guys came, and I wanted to remind you that there are a few upcoming webinars. If you want to go deeper about revenue models, we have Ava Ho on Monday. That one got moved from this Friday to next Monday. And we have winning pitch presentations with more folks from Mars on April 4th, and that's 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. So we realize a lot of you are in different time zones, and we appreciate that you come. So just be mindful of our time zone and know what time it is in your time zone. And then finally, we'll have another one about Q&A, because pitching is really important, but being able to answer questions is really important too, because inevitably you're going to get some, and you're going to want to be able to answer them creatively and confidently. So, we also have a user experience one coming up, and you can see that on the Technovation curriculum website. So I want to just really thank Jim and Amy for taking time out of, I imagine, a very busy schedule to come meet with us Technovation people. And you can answer, I can answer any questions you might have. My email address is below. I'll send out an email after this with a link to the video recording in a couple hours. And just thank you so much. Any last questions? Any words you want to say, Amy or Jim?
Oh, just thanks. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you.